Hi guys, welcome to a new tutorial. On a previous video, I showed you how to make a pivot table. Now I'm going to show you how to update and refresh it so that you can add more data to analyze. If you have questions, don't forget to leave a comment in the section below. Also, you can download the sample file in the description. If you like the video, don't forget to like and to subscribe. So let's get started! So now that you know how to create pivot tables, I'm going to show you how to update your data in it. So in this example, my dataset went from cell A1 down to cell E21, but probably I'm going to have new data that I'm going to need to be available on my pivot table. So let's just copy this, for example, and I'm going to paste it here. I'm going to put them in yellow so that you can recognize that this is new data. And instead of February, I'm going to change it to March. Okay, there we go. So I have these new rows that are from March, but they are still not displayed on my pivot table because right now my pivot table is only taking this data from cell A1 down to cell A21. I need to tell my pivot table that I now have more data in here. So I'm gonna teach you two methods to do this. The first one is to select your whole data from cell A1 down to cell E26, and on the home menu I'm gonna go to Format as Table, and you can choose any design you want, it's not relevant. I'm just gonna select this one right here. Okay, I'm gonna click OK, and there we go. So now my data has a table format. So I'm gonna select my pivot table, I'm gonna click any point in it, and I'm gonna go up to the pivot table analyze, and I'm gonna look for the data section. Okay, so I'm gonna click on change data source. I'm gonna change the data source, and as you can see, it still has the table range from cell A1 to cell E21. So what I want to do is to select my data, and now it says table 2. I'm gonna click OK. So now you can see that I have March in here. So this is the new data that we just placed below our table. So if I add another row in here, I'm just gonna copy this one, and this time I'm going to change it to April. Okay, and I'm gonna click my pivot table, and I'm gonna go up to the pivot table analyze, and now I can click on refresh, and there we go. So now I have the month of April available. So since I changed my dataset to a table, I don't need to change the data source anymore. I just need to click on the refresh button. So whenever I need to put more data, I can do the same thing. I can just paste the data below, and still the data is gonna be formatted as part of the table. However, I don't like to do this because there's a problem with using the table format. And usually your files will become larger because you have colors and other formats in here that make your dataset larger. So your file is going to become larger every time that you do this. And let's say, for example, that you have a large dataset, then the size of the file is going to increase significantly. So I don't recommend using this option unless your dataset is small. Okay? So now I'm gonna teach you the second way to do this without changing your dataset to a table. So I have added new rows in here, the same that we used on a previous example. I'm gonna click on my table, and I'm gonna click on pivot table analyze. So I'm gonna change the data source. I'm gonna click in here, and still my dataset is from cell A1 to cell E21. So one thing that I can do is to select my data down to cell E26, but since I know that I'm going to be adding more data below this row, I'm gonna press the Shift, Control, and down arrow to select all of the cells that are on columns A to E. So whenever I add a new row in here, it won't be necessary to change the data source again. So I'm gonna click OK. And there we go. So now I can see the sales of March. However, as you can see, there's one problem with doing this. And the thing is that since the pivot table is taking blank lines in here, I'm gonna get a blank in here and down here. So I can correct this by clicking here on row labels, and I can select label filters, and I'm gonna select does not equal, and I'm gonna type in here in parentheses the word blank, which is the word that is displaying here, and I'm gonna click OK. So now I won't have this data displayed, and I can update my data. So for example, I'm gonna copy this right here, and I'm gonna change this to April. Okay, but it's still not displayed, and that is because we need to refresh our pivot table. So I'm gonna go back to pivot table analyze, and I'm just gonna click here on refresh. So now I can see the sales of April. Now, the only thing that I need to do whenever I add more data is to click the refresh button, and the pivot table is gonna update with the newest data. So those are the two ways in which you can update your pivot table with new data. In different videos, I'm gonna teach you more techniques about pivot tables. Alright guys, I hope that video was useful. If it was, please don't forget to leave a comment, to like, and to subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, and you'll be motivating me to upload more tutorials for you. Also, don't forget that you can download the sample file in the description below. So, thanks again, and see you next time!